This is the Jim Nog Pod, and I'm your host, Jim Noguera. On today's show, the Bronx Over-Thinkers Society, Marcos de la Guagua, Jose Reyes, Miguel Gil, and yours truly. Let's start the show.
This is the Jim Nog Pod with Jim Noguera. It is the Jim Nog Pod with Jim Noguera. Most interested man. It is the Jim Nog Pod with Jim Noguera. The most interested man. Jim Noguera. In the world.
Welcome to the pod. On this episode, I get together with some of my friends. We have a little group called the Bronx Over-Thinkers Society. It was a lot of fun seeing them again. During the podcast, we introduce ourselves, so I'll save introductions for the podcast. We talked about what the Bronx Over-Thinkers Society is, what we would like it to be, things that matter to us, philosophy, philosophers. There's a lightning round towards the end of the conversation. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did. And now, Marcos de la Guagua, Jose Reyes, and Miguel Gil. So here we are, my group of friends. I think let's begin by giving a short introduction of who we are, since I think most people probably don't know who we are. I'm trying to start this Jim Nog Pod, this podcast. My name is James Noguera. I am your humble host, and I'm an educator. I'm a teacher, and I have an MFA. I'm a writer, and that's a little bit about me. Next, maybe Miguel.
My name is Miguel. I'm a philosopher, I guess. I like contemplating things, matters. I used to be a teacher, a professor. I think I'm still an educator, and I think I'm a very concerned educator about things related to men these days and family relationships in particular. So you could say I'm a bit of a critic as well.
Okay, my name is Jose Reyes, and I am an educator. I teach English as a second language, and I consider myself a spiritual person and have deep moral values, and is always open, a person that is always open to discuss things that have to do with psychology and the brain.
Hey, I'm Marcos. My artist name is Marcos de la Guagua. Hey, fellas, say guagua. Guagua. It's fun to say guagua, and that's half of what it's about. But I also have been inspired and challenged my whole life by the way, whether you like it or not, between every stop on a bus, a new community is born. And I think that's come to be a powerful metaphor for the kind of work I'm inspired to do in the arts and as an educator.
Awesome. So part of why we're here is because we have very informally started a little group here. And I'll just say that I'm partial to the name Bronx Over-Thinkers Society, and then we've been debating the name.
Oh, wait. What do you think about that?
I think it's fine.
Wait. You're not overthinking it. We have to overthink this. So the gentleman in the blue shirt has proposed Bronx Over-Thinkers Society, but there's other options, such as the Overthinkers Society of the Bronx.
Sure. So we're stuck
The Bronx
on
Society for Overthinking.
we are stuck on the name, which means that it's very apropos.
Can you think of any others? Miguel?
I can't think of any other name because for me, I would really have to think hard about it. And that in itself proves that the name is sufficient in itself.
Yeah.
I'm to be a philosopher is to, in some people's view, can be to overthink things and to critique things, maybe going beyond what is just simply merely accepting what is thought about things. So that's a form of maybe overthinking. So I guess if there's someone who lives to some degree in the Bronx and travels in the Bronx, but overthinks about things, then I'd be a good example.
Yeah. But so I think there's another option there, the Bronx Society for Thinking About Things. That was from his words. That was very brilliant.
Yeah, I don't think we'll settle on the name.
Okay.
But I like bots because then
I like society. Yeah, I like S-Bot.
S-Bot.
Bronx Society of Bronx Overthinkers.
Wow, that
Okay.
doesn't work. Okay. Because then we're the bots. Then we are the Bronx Overthinkers.
Okay, you seem to be winning. I'm just trying to delay your victory.
I like bots because the thing is that the reason why I like bots is because in some ways I think men are becoming more automatic. We're not being true to who we are. We're being more disposable. We're being more based on utility, services rendered, but not who we are as people. So maybe bots, sufficient.
Okay, I don't think the name should. What did you write down?
We aren't quite done. So first of all, I couldn't hold this in my short-term memory and manipulate different possible acronyms as you were saying. That's somewhat challenging. But we have powerful tools here at Bronx Community College, such as notebooks and pens and random sheets of paper that are in the notebooks. Anyhow, so it seems like there's some popularity gathering around Bronx Overthinkers Society, which would be the simple bots. But don't forget, gentlemen, there's also the possibility of SOTADB, Society of Overthinking of the Bronx.
But then that would be overthinking things of the Bronx when I'm not going to be thinking beyond the limits of Tremont or Fordham Road or what's in Bronx Community College.
Very good. Very good. I understand now. So we could add which would be Society of Overthinkers of the Bronx and for overthinking in the Bronx.
Okay, so there are options.
There are options.
So I think, before people maybe think that we're weird,
Let's
for
put an
obsessing over
online
this,
poll.
We could definitely we can poll it. But
Okay.
let's talk about what the hell this little informal group is. So I think for me it's like a little group of overthinkers or critical thinkers. And we have certain likes in common, and you're also all close friends of mine. We've known each other for a long time. Maybe we can talk about briefly how we met each other, real brief, and then maybe what are some of the interests that brought us together. So like, I met Marcos after he came actually here as a guest poet, featured poet at one of our poets cafes here at the Writing Center, Bronx CC. And I think we clicked pretty much right away because, well, we're fellow artists, and I don't know. You're easy to get along with, my friend.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
I'd say you are too.
Thank you.
And I think I'd mainly noticed that I think you're our common denominator. I think you're the person who's brought us together, James.
I try to do that. I don't have many friends in real life, so sometimes I recruit them from work or something because I don't have any friends. I left most of the friends that I had because, it's like when you're not in quality friendships, it's better to sort of break. And so, and I'm glad that I have you guys. So Jose has been I've known Jose for a very long time. I've known him probably longer and more than all of you guys, and he's a thinker. He's a deep thinker who we've had many a conversation about philosophical topics, religious topics, and he never gets upset. He never judges me for questioning his beliefs. He takes them on as a thinking exercise, and that's part of, I think, why we've gotten along so much. And I think I've been able to respectfully question certain, interpretations and stuff like that. And with Miguel, also similar to Jose, I met at work, and such a deep thinker. He's always telling me about these usually German philosophers who I don't know much about. I don't know much about what is it, Wittgenstein and all those other cats. But he tells me about them, and so that's really cool. What about you guys? Do you have any stories about how you met the members of our little group, or why you guys bonded?
Miguel, do you want to make any joke about what he can and can't?
I would say. I would say.
Do you see what I'm doing here?
I think I've worked in the Writing Center the longest, 27 years. Even before Professor Robertson.
Really?
Yep.
Oh wow! I didn't know that
School Writing Center, and I don't know. And this started even as a student here, as an undergrad, and I would say that honestly, I've always been a reluctant tutor, a reluctant teacher, and let's just say we met each other because I just had the skill set to work here. I like writing. I was a good writer, supposedly. Got good grades. I'm a deep thinker, so one of the first people I met was you, James. We didn't get along at all at first because we were like the same but different. I was involved in everything almost, apart from certain things in conference, or rather meetings that we had, workshops and stuff like that. And he was very to himself. And then Jose here, I met him actually first, maybe it was as a student. Yeah. And I did some teaching at a place on campus called The Clip. Continuing, what's this? The abbreviation for, but offhand.
Something Bridge. I don't remember.
Yeah. The building of the Clip through Bridge, the Bridge program, which was basically a preparatory program for college writing, particularly the tests that we were giving at the time, college exams rather. You, Marcos, I met you maybe in the tail end, like maybe a few years ago. It was at a time when we were kind of like still the old crew.
Yeah.
You know, everyone kind of like the old, still a bit of the good amount of tutors that we had from the old center. You remember? In Philosophy Hall. So for me, I don't really have any stories. I think that's the best story I could give, is just that I'm a fixture here, and thankfully this is the first year I'm not going to have to work here. And it's my choice, you know. And it's mainly because I want to just take care of myself. I want to take care of my family. And maybe that'll give me, in the time I have more time to hang out with you guys.
No, you want to go first? Okay. Well, I know James for many years, like he said. We always have talked about different topics, not only religious topics or philosophical topics, but also practical things, right? Practical matters, and talking about things, and even tutoring, and why not also women, right?
From time to time.
Yeah, from time to time.
We have.
Yeah, and that's
Respectfully.
respectfully.
Thank you.
Respectfully.
We are on the web.
And I know Miguel, like he said, back in the days when I was taking classes, I saw him as a professor. And then we worked here together in the Writing Center. We worked first in Philosophy Hall, and then we moved over here to Sage Hall. And then I had to go to teach in the CLIP program, but we continue. We still have the same connection there. Every time we have a chance, we talked. Yeah. And I know Marcos, as a tutor, we didn't have a chance to kind of work together, but I know through your work and your artistic career, and then through Daniel too, and then coming over here, I know about you, and we also had a chance to eat mango, right? We went to the restaurant of Miguelina, close to Miguelina, saludos. Yeah, close to it was in Tremont, I think University Avenue. And, close to Tremont Avenue too.
Close,
yeah. And so we had a wonderful breakfast. Yeah, and then we had a conversation. Yeah.
Was it a good mango?
It was good. Yeah, it was a great mango. He asked for the tres golpes, I think, right? The tres golpes. That's the best. Yeah, I just got the cheese, but you got the tres golpes, and then that's it. Yep.
Yeah. No, actually, I guess are you a vegetarian?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we're each vegetarian. So we just got like tres golpe, pero less, yeah. Only two de dos tipos. Tres golpes de dos tipos. O tres tipos con dos golpes cada uno. Or más o menos. I think, I will never know what a tres golpes meal tastes like with salami. I usually ask for extra queso.
So you are completely a vegetarian?
Well, I see being a vegetarian as a calling, but I see it in a similar way to how I experience ethical choices in my life overall. That for me, ethics are relational. And that I was trying to think if there was a secular way I could express this. I'm not sure if there is. But so
Maybe you're overthinking it.
I could be. I
You know,
could
just
be.
say what
No,
it is.
for me, ethics are relational. Jesus said, I didn't come to overturn the law, but to fulfill it. But Jesus' specific commandments are all about loving, right? And you can't put a list of things that you can't have a to-do list that fully satisfies a vocation to love, right? You know? So, and there may be some things on that list of vocation to love in one relationship that wouldn't make sense in another relationship. So I feel a clear calling toward nonviolence as a response to that vocation to love, right? And many times I think that choosing to eat, to not eat animal flesh, and to try to reduce the ways that my choices support an economy of cruelty, many times that feels like a very meaningful calling to me. Sometimes Titi Tonya put el pernil en mi plato, you know, and it feels like it feels like it would be like the loving, nonviolent choice is to affirm my connection to Titi Tonya, you know, and so I actually welcome those opportunities because Jesus also said it's not what goes into your mouth, but what comes out of it that makes you impure. So I see that as embracing here and now. I normally won't economically support cruelty or an economy that's based on cruelty, but here and now, if I eat something that's like not on my kosher list in my brain, that's a reminder for me that I'm not better than anybody else because of what I eat or what I don't eat.
No. Thank you for sharing, Marcos.
Is that overthunk enough?
No.
It's pretty well overthunk.
Look, maybe our overthinking is more of a matter of trying to be clear about our thoughts, right? So, but for me, although I'm not a vegetarian, I am someone that follows certain spiritual practices, and I do believe in fasting on certain days until a certain time. I'm not there yet in becoming a vegetarian, and I may well have to be one day because, become one day, mainly because I'm getting older, and I just, my body, the tongue appreciates one thing, but my body is telling me something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Beef at one time was very tasty. And even eating a lot of meat, but now it's getting less and less interesting, and because I just don't like the consequences, the pains, you know, the things that come from it, feeling heavy. And so that's one of the reasons why ever so often the thought of eating less, maybe a certain economy of not having so much is making me think of vegetarianism.
I think that's great. So I've had an interesting relationship with vegetarianism and veganism. So I turned vegetarian around 19 or so, which sometimes I joke about that because I had turned atheist around 16 or something. So I joke like it was easier for me to give up God than to give up meat. Even though, I mean, nowadays I feel like I have a different connection. I wouldn't call myself exactly atheist today. But that's another matter. So I do practice veganism sometimes, and I try to and so my goal. So I've gone on and off. I went off recently because I went to the doctor one time, and even though my results, by the way, my blood work is excellent, right? But what I was doing was I was vegan 5 days, 5 days a week, and I was fasting for 17 hours, 5 days a week. And for me, it wasn't too difficult. Like I naturally, I guess, I just don't eat that much. And but then the doctor was sort of like, like, are you anorexic, or like, it was weird questioning. And even though my blood work came out excellent. I mean, she was saying like, everyone should do this diet because my blood work was so good. Which, by the way, for all the haters who are talking shit about veganism,
This guy, check out his blood work.
So for me, anyway.
Talk about overanalyzing.
So for me, veganism is really cool, and I do see myself moving more in that direction. And for me, it's just about, people bring up environmental factors, and that's important, and they bring up other things. But for me, morally, I can't escape the fact that I want to cause as little harm to conscious non-human animals as possible. And I recognize that plants are alive, and I understand certain arguments. People talk about, well, maybe plants are conscious, etc. People really do say that, and it's interesting. And there's some scientists who have done some interesting stuff with that. There's an interesting TED talk about Venus flytraps and how they're not necessarily a mouse trap that snaps shut every time something is triggered, but there's an actual there's almost like a math that's done to make sure that this is in fact worth the energy spent in closing the trap. So that's interesting, right? But at the end of the day, I feel like you have to eat something, and the question is, what do you eat? And for me, plants is where I draw like the line. So for me, I have to basically eat plants, and if I'm going to eat something that's conscious, even though I don't think I'm a little biased, I don't think most plants are conscious, but anyway. So that explains sort of my ethics around eating. I thought this was an interesting topic. I don't know if anybody wants to.
I was just thinking for any animal, we should eat Venus flytraps, because it's basically self-defense. It's for an animal to eat a plant that eats animals.
I think that's a good point. Yeah.
So, Jose, you're a vegetarian?
Technically, but I don't think I am, because I eat fish, salmon and fish. So that's not quite a vegetarian per se.
Because I'll tell you this, my body is very skeptical at times about vegetarianism, because when I smell a good pernil, or when I'm smelling a good pastele, it's like I go like this. I go like this. Well, and then there's something I've noticed about whatever spiritual practices I'm engaged in, is that ultimately, I have to make a certain choice, because the thing is health. I think if we're talking, trying to say that whether eating a certain way is right or not, it should be paramount. It should be the first thing, it's a major thing. If what you're eating is giving you optimum health, to live the lifestyle that is like healthy, that means moderation, not pushing yourself without stress. I'm open-minded enough to say that all are right, just as long as you understand that you have to be responsible for the choices you make. Like if you're going to eat beef, you understand that there's a lot of energy spent to cultivate that type of meat. And also your body's going to spend a lot of energy breaking down that meat. And that's why for me, even though I love my pernil, you know, I have to ultimately make that choice where I'm going to find out that one day, if I'm looking at optimum health, I have to consider what will spend the least amount of energy.
I want to say just two things about that. One is the idea of having following a healthy diet is important because people live longer and they can benefit longer others and themselves, and you can see the real benefits, at least in certain groups. For example, I know, and I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, follow if you go to, for example, a report by CNN, and there was a special episode in Accent Health, and Dr. Sanjay Gupta, I think. So he went to California, to Loma Linda, to look at these Seventh-day Adventist people that live in that area. And they have been consistently appear in the top 3 places of people who live longer. And it's because of their diet, because of their way of eating and the lifestyle. So I think that is important to keep in mind as we are living in an era with a seemingly contradiction, like a contradiction because we can live longer, but we suffer more. Like after 70, after 60, you have more people having health issues. But then this group is different. I remember this guy, he was interviewing this guy. It was a 95 surgeon. He was practicing until 95. Until 95, he was a surgeon. And then he retired at 95. I mean, that's just crazy. Because 95 is just, I mean, by most standards, some people are dead. So this guy was just retiring and stopped being a surgeon at that time. So that's one thing. On the other hand, though, I was looking at another kind of report in the New York Times. This expert in bacteria was talking about bacteria resistance and antibiotic resistance. And she was saying how vegetarians and people who practice veganism, sometimes they are brag about what they do and the health that they have. And then after she finished talking about how bacteria transfer from animal to plants, then she says, let me now talk to people, the vegetarians. Yes. You are not anywhere better. Like you're not in a good position either, because bacteria are everywhere. And if you think about how they are being transmitted now and how they're becoming stronger, then plants are really an easy spot for them to go in and kind of live there. And then they are getting transmitted easily. So on the one hand, we do believe, and I strongly believe in a healthy diet and practicing veganism and being vegetarian. On the other hand, we don't want to be like, we don't feel that we are superior because we're practicing that. At the end of the day, we are living in a time when really bacteria and other issues are affecting our health from different angles. And we cannot really we can do things about it, but not that a lot.
So if nobody wants to add anything more.
May I ask Jose, ask you a question about that? So I've noticed in my fellowshipping with Adventists an emphasis on like live for the moment or appreciate the moment, because as the name implies, the movement teaches a reading of scripture and a reading of current events that says that Jesus' second coming is imminent, right? As in Advent, the advent of Christ. So there's that. The world may end. This may be our last Sabbath, right? I hear that when I visit Adventist churches often. And also, people are making dietary choices to live healthy, as the example you cited, living a vocation as a healer up to the age of 95. I think that's a remarkable combination and leads to like deeply Christian actualization of the gospel in my interactions with Adventists. But I definitely have also experienced that people who believe one of those things wouldn't necessarily embrace the other.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like when my pastor was organizing South Bronx churches to deal with, immediate problems in the neighborhood, or she was working with efforts to organize South Bronx churches. There was this one congregation that they couldn't organize. It was an Adventist, but it was a congregation. It was like Cristo viene pronto kind of ministry, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about the trash pickup. Jesus is coming." So, but I've never experienced that with Adventists. I experience that other combination of those two ideas, which to other people would be in tension. Could you say something about how you think those ideas fit together, how they're actualized for you and maybe for other in your community?
So the Bible talks about the God is going to punish those who destroy the earth and its resources. And so while we are waiting, we believe that, Jesus is going to intervene based on the biblical promises that appear in the New Testament. We also understand that we have a responsibility to take care of the environment and the climate. We need to be active. That's part of the health reform that was that we have in the scriptures and the writings of Ellen G. White, someone that we consider was inspired and gave this message of health reform earlier, like in the 1901, 1915, way before the green movement came along. Way before, decades before, we already had the message that we needed to change. We needed to stop to do certain things, like drinking and smoking and doing exercise, and we're supposed to do other things too. So I think we, because of that message, we embraced the idea of being responsible for what we eat, but also how we take care of the air while we are waiting for the second coming. And so I think is part of the message, and also it's also part of what the Bible tells us, right? Yeah.
So, in another sense, it's a connection of this notion that, God has a plan, and also our choices matter.
Yes.
And I think that's also both in religious systems of thinking and philosophical systems of thinking. That's a challenging dance, to balance. And I absolutely do, I feel that's one reason why I love spending time with Adventists, because I feel like that tradition has a lot to teach everybody.
And
Combine
since
those things.
we're on that topic, my girlfriend is Adventist, so there's that. Actually, Miguel said interesting. So, this is an interesting segue into something I wanted to ask. This was one of the planned questions. I do have some planned questions here We might even have like a little lightning round, which might be fun. But this question is, since we are the Bronx Overthinkers Society, or the bring that up again. I can't even read that. It's just.
There are other possible. There are other. Nominations are still open. Okay, we at the society believe in an open canon in terms of possible names.
Okay, so the
of
list
the
grows.
organization, and affirm that there's much wisdom in the writings of Ellen White, whether you're viewing it from a religious or secular basis.
absolutely.
And in fact, that there's such an important female leader in a church is an underappreciated aspect of. Okay. Anyhow, so currently on paper we have bots or Soto Ba Fo Ti.
All right, so options.
Yeah.
So the question I wanted to
Not
ask.
make your nominations on Twitter at Jim Nog.
Sure, I'll do a poll.
Yeah.
I'll do a poll.
Okay. Good.
I hope nobody picks that. So, who's one of? Let's try to keep this limited. Okay, we are the overthinkers. Sometimes we're the overtalkers.
Yeah.
So, who's like maybe your go-to philosopher? I wanted to say favorite philosopher, but that could be challenging. So, who's like your favorite philosopher, or one of your top your go-to philosophers? I'll let Miguel start since he hasn't said anything in a while.
I believe I would have to say this is Otto Schopenhauer, and he would probably be. He would definitely be my go-to philosopher.
You gonna tell us why?
Why? Yeah, I have to say why.
Yeah.
Because I think if there's anything that he believes or he's theoretically tried to arrive at in reference to reality, in reference to human existence, I think it's still something pertinent today. He tried to include different thinkers. He was one of the first philosophers that actually tried to engage Western philosophy with and making connections with Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism. So I know he's not a favorite to many philosophers, even thinkers today, because he has some very harsh and very dark thoughts about humanity. But I think I go to him mainly because it's like he, strangely enough, he was a very strict vegetarian, and he was also a lifelong bachelor, which I hope to be.
Okay. I turn again and again to the picture books by Daniel Erlander, especially Manna and Mercy. A short, and the subtitle's something like a short summary of God's unfolding promise to mend the entire universe, which is a treatment of the entire Bible, but viewing it with that through line, that God is at work to mend the entire universe. So he distills a lot of thinking from my faith tradition, evangelical Lutheran Christianity, and distills kind of the sources that come that have come into that tradition in a way that I can digest in picture books, actually. The longest one's about just over 100 pages. But there's a lot there's a lot in each picture, in each word. So he breaks down Soren Kierkegaard, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther, in like one drawing and a few notes, in books like Baptized We Live. And I often recently I'm turning to Toni Morrison. I didn't get assigned any Toni Morrison in school, but when I heard about her death, I realized that I hadn't really read anything by her, and from hearing her speaking, I realized that she had a very rigorous and Catholic, like universal worldview, I just realized in her writing, she's all that's present, as she describes one community or one relationship, she's also kind of describing, a cosmos.
She is assigned reading in one of my courses, by the way.
That's great, bro.
Yeah, so thinker or philosopher, writer, and any smart intellectual person you look at. I guess I'll go next. I'll just keep it simple. One of the earliest, one of the OGs that I look back at is Socrates. By the way, I'm surprised. Well, you haven't spoken yet, Jose, but I'm surprised nobody mentioned Jesus. But I'll assume.
I wanted to include Jesus, but the thing is, you may not believe it, but I kind of put Christianity in there because Schopenhauer, and he's one of the, I think, interesting philosophers that tried to make a complement of understanding the thinking behind the faiths.
So, Socrates, I think, even though I think he was wrong about writing, somewhat infamously, he was anti-writing, because he felt like all of these skills of memory and so on would be lost. A lot of rhetoricians used memory. Memory hacks to memorize things, and a lot of mnemonic devices that we use go back to that time. So, so I disagree with him on that. But when you look at the Socratic method, mostly his lifestyle, know thyself, the unexamined life is not worth living. I dig his lifestyle, and I dig that he the way he went out. He believed in democracy. He believed in law and getting a trial, and he accepted the consequences. Many of his closest friends and peers told him to get the hell out of there. He had the chance to flee, but he didn't. And I don't know. He's just, to me, an OG, and I always go back to that. Yeah.
Well, my person, I don't know if he's a philosopher, but definitely a great thinker. C.S. Lewis. His logic is a simple but profound, deep logic, and he, in the book Mere Christianity, is this book that really to me helps me understand the existence of God, the possibility of the existence of God, going from someone that is like an atheist and going and understanding deep issues of existence, of our existence, and the existence of God. But also, he's a dynamic writer too, because he wrote about things that were not religious, and so it's a deep thinker, a person who also wrote about things that matter, like life and death, and then practical issues, personal experiences. So I really admire C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, I was made to read C.S. Lewis in a theology course I took at Fordham, and I mean he's a smart guy, and he has good arguments. But I was a little bit resentful because I think we read 2 books in that theology course, and 2 of them had to do with, I think, people who were atheists who went toward religion. And I was like, but I usually hear people who are religious who go towards atheism. And anyway, I just felt a little bit like they were pushing it a little bit because of who was teaching. But it's Fordham is a great school. There are some sisters and people teaching, religious people teaching the courses. But anyway, so I wanted to ask another interesting question. It's a time machine question. Okay. Time machine questions, which are always fun, since we're thinkers here. I can give it to you one of 2 ways, right? You can either answer the question, if you can go back in time and have a conversation with one person, who would it be? Or you can answer the question, when, right? When would you go if you had a time machine? And the time machine can go forward, it can go backward, as much as you want, right? I'll let you guys think about that. So for me, I like to think about silly stuff like this, and I would love to see, even though it's not a fixed point in time necessarily, but I would like to see as close as possible the first humans. And if you know anything about evolution, there's it's not like there's a gorilla and then a gorilla gives birth to a baby boy, right? So it's a gradation. It's going to be difficult to really determine where do you draw that line, but I would love to see that and see our human story. As a human, I'm human biased, so I would love to see that.
Wow, what a question. I was when you initially asked the question, I was thinking, I'm gonna go back in time, meet up with Arthur Schopenhauer, right at the point where he finally got the cred that he always wanted, like maybe a few years before, his demise, his death. I was thinking along those lines, but then I was thinking, you know what? That wouldn't be true. That wouldn't be really honest. That wouldn't be something. That would be something. So I overthink it. And I said, no. I would do something that would really destroy me now and destroy any sense of things. I would actually go back in time to meet up with myself. And meet up myself probably about the time I was like I was really in love with one girl, and it was a strange point in my life in high school where I didn't know. It wasn't only the feelings I had for her, but I didn't know where I stood in the sense of how to live my life. And I had this thing where I used to sometimes go to Bronx Botanical Garden, and I would just ponder about things, and I would just cry sometimes, and I would just think about her and what have you. And I would like to find maybe just 2 hours when I was about maybe 18 or 19. I think it was 19. And just tell him, how women are, how guys are, and that, I'm basically him in some alternate reality, and that honestly, I'm telling this to you, but in all likelihood, this could be my own destruction. Because if you are you, that means that whatever I'm going to tell you now, it's going to destroy me. And I would tell him literally, you know what? You feel like no one loves you. No one cares about you. You feel like you'll die without this girl, and that you don't know where you're going to go. But I would talk to him, and I would just pat him on the back, and I say, you know what? There's something. There's a God that loves you. It really loves you. And you know what? Forget about your family. Forget about all these people, and understand that you have talent inside of you. Focus on that. Forget about love. Forget about all the crazy things that people dream up in this life. Make that reality that's inside you real. Love yourself. And then I would go like this. I'll go like this. You know what? I love you so much. That's why I came back. And I know this may sound crazy, but in loving you, I'm destroying myself maybe.
That was deep. Yeah, that was deep. That was deep. Yeah. No, you can just continue. I was thinking about going back in history to a particular great time, but listening to Miguel, he destroyed my possible, like the possible historical period that I wanted to go to. So I'm just gonna pass it on you.
Okay, all right.
I just wanted to see some early humans. That made me feel sad about myself. Okay. No, go ahead.
So I love sci-fi, and I like time travel, sci-fi stories that are driven by time travel. But if Doctor Who actually showed up, I'm pretty sure I'd be like, I'm not getting in that TARDIS. I'm pretty sure. And it's so the question brings up grace for me, and this I think the thought or the consciousness that points to peace is tied. An element of any consciousness that points to peace needs to be the sense of awareness of a blessing, and as Miguel said, if I go into the past, it's impossible to know what I might be changing about the grace of all that is. And if I go into the future, there's this, well, either it's deterministic and I'm like, all right, well, that's how things will be. Or if it's not deterministic, well, that's not my future. Why do I even, what does this even mean to me? And so, although when I was a little kid and I saw, when I was really little, I saw a bunch of old school U.S. Hollywood-made Western movies. And then I learned a little history from more critical points of view. And then I saw Dances with Wolves, and I was also watching the A-Team. So I put all of this together along with the Back to the Future movies, and I thought, if you went into the past and just dropped off either the members of the A-Team or just a few of their machine guns with some Taínos, human history could be significantly less violent in the long run. And that was the fantasy I had as a kid. But now I do. So I don't know. I still have a certain sympathy for that fantasy, but I also have this sense of all that was being part of the grace of all that is. But I'm a little concerned that could just be speaking from a position of privilege, right? It points back to me this thing in Christian traditions of eschatology, of interest in the end of time. And that doesn't necessarily, that could have different meanings in English, right? Like means and the ends, that, right? The end of the end of this hat is to, block the sun or something in that sense, right? Right. So I think there's that combination that in many Christian traditions, the end of time is this vision of a great getting up morning where you can have that conversation maybe with that philosopher that you admired, where you could meet those people, right? Those first humans, and meet what's the future from my point of view, but all of it's together in a reconciled end of time.
I think that's the plot of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the next one.
Yes, the movie's about eschatology. That's the big word.
Yeah, the new one is going to have that as a plot. Go ahead.
I actually, 1 week ago, I was in Los Tres Ojos. It's a cave in Santo Domingo, the capital of the Dominican Republic. And I was talking to this guy. This guy was explaining to us about the Taínos. You mentioned the Taínos. And I also went to Las Cuevas de las Maravillas, which is another cave going from Santo Domingo to La Romana, between, I think, San Pedro and La Romana, around that area. And I saw some of the drawings that they supposedly drew and made. And then I asked the question, what do we know about the Taínos? They would say, well, they are believed to have come from Puerto Rico. And then I asked, so what made you think that they came from Puerto Rico? He said, well, that's just what history has taught us. But then I was thinking, okay, the Taínos, how did they look like? Were they similar to the Indians that we call Indians here in America, and how did they live? I know that we know certain things by what people have written, but it's different if you were there, living with them, struggling with them, because they went to this cave, by the way, when they have rituals, but also when they were hurricanes. And they left and they slept there and they stayed there for late days until they were kind of, the weather was okay. So that was an interesting thing for me to see, an underground kind of haven for this group that I don't know, but all of us, the Dominican, of course, we have a mixture of African and other races, but I would like to meet the Taínos in particular and see, who they are and what they did and all those things. Yeah.
Very good answers. Yeah.
Well, so many, especially in Puerto Rico, there's a pretty strong movement of people today, saying that if you look in terms, certainly if you look in terms of people, one of the lies of the conquista was that the genetic people of the Taínos ended after the conquista. That there are a lot of people with genetic markers from the Taínos. And I have, I think it's the African heritage of the Caribbean has often been marginalized, and one of the strategies has been to say, oh no, that's not an African he's not African, he's not black, that's not that he's Indian or something like that. So as a bombero, as a planero, my main practice has been trying to respect Puerto Rico's African heritage, but there's also a very vibrant movement of folk, definitely in Puerto Rico, and I me imagino en otro parte del Caribe, right? Of living a Taino identity as a contemporary identity. As far as I understand, that does have to depend on reconstructing, and I do think that's different than palo, bomba, plena, rumba, as traditions that have been continuously passed down through hundreds of years. But there is, certainly tons of people don't feel that there are lots of spaces where if you want to be with the Taínos, right, and maybe claim your Taino heritage, you can do that as a contemporary person.
Okay, so I want to. We're like nearing the end, so let's do a lightning round. I think this would be eschatology of overthinkers. Okay, I like that, Marcos. So let's do this. So these are responses to keep within like 30 seconds, something like that. Okay. So first question. Name one thing that you love about the Bronx. Actually, I need to think about it. So I have a non-PC answer and then a PC answer. So go ahead.
The Bronx, mainly the parks. They have all these great parks. Van Cortlandt Park. We also have botanical gardens, as I related before. What can I say? I love all the vegetation. Yeah.
I love the courage of our diverse people to get up every morning and just be people, especially because lots of Bronx folk are either coming from places or here and now experiencing institutional disrespect and dehumanization. But if I can get myself out the door in the morning, I see families heroically going to school, heroically going to work, heroically insisting that today matters, that their lives matter. And I don't always believe that about myself and my own life when I first wake up in the morning. But if I can get myself out the door, I'm really inspired by the Bronx in motion.
No, I can't top that.
You can edit that to the end.
Or I can maybe add in my introduction of you and then just take credit for that one. I do love You know what I love? I love how it's a little bit gritty. You know, it's a little bit tough on the outside. And I kind of like that because no matter how much shit we go through and the problems that we have, we're gonna fight it. You know, we the people who make it out, and I think this is true for like many inner city places and you know the five boroughs, because we see many rappers like Jay-Z, 50 Cent, right? Too, he's from New York, I think, Brooklyn, right? So yeah, I mean they have a tough exterior, and I kind of like it, you know, because that toughness is what you need. Life is tough, it's brutal, it never stops, you know, the waves keep on coming. So yeah, that's what I like.
I think the Bronx is a I would say as a welcoming place for many immigrants, especially from Hispanic communities. Even though we have difficulties between one race and another race, like understanding each other and sharing values, and then communicating, I still think that this is like a welcoming place. People can come and stay here, and then if they want to go to another place, to Pennsylvania and all that, they have a choice. But at least this is the good first stop, a first station, if you want to kind of know and navigate New York. And we have a cheaper rent. I mean, in comparison to Manhattan and Queens, and I mean, in many parts in Queens, and even in Brooklyn, because it's a little far, but we are closer to Manhattan, so we're kind of in a good location, and we still have like some sort of cheaper rent.
All right, let's try to keep it a little bit closer to lightning round. Okay, one thing that you hate about the Bronx. So, in keeping with what I said, I'm gonna say, while we are tough on the outside, sometimes we're too tough on the outside, and we're a little bit maybe pissed off or in a bad mood, or a little bit mean to each other. And I feel like we could soften a little bit sometimes. You know, the world isn't always out to get us. So that's just the other side of the coin.
The crowding. I have my sensibilities. I was raised in the Bronx, and still I'm getting better as I've gotten older, but noisy, crowding, and that's it. That's what I don't like.
Housing conditions. Yes, we have cheaper rent, but then the housing conditions are terrible in many places, and there seems to be no justice, you know.
The widespread sense among Bronx people that we can't change things. And that's, I don't know, if you posed it to people like that, I don't think most Bronx people would accept that notion, you know, because we're tough. You'd push, what do you mean I can't change, you know? But there is often a sense, that our choices don't matter. We complain to each other about, in sentences that often use the pronoun they without clearly identifying a subject-verb-object relationship. And if you don't have that, you don't have an analysis of who's acting, you know, what the action is and who's being acted upon. And you can't begin, you know, to organize. I think if you study Bronx history, you understand why people have come to have that point of view. That was people, every Bronx elected official opposed the construction of the Cross Bronx Expressway, for example, but it got built and it kept getting built, evicting 60,000 people over 20 years, you know.
By the way, this is not a,
But we-
a lightning
not a
round
lightning round.
response.
Sorry,
I have to point that out because it's.
but
All right, we're
but
giving-
you broke the rule and I followed your model and built upon it.
Okay, maybe I did. Okay, I feel like I should give Miguel more time. So.
But sorry, I feel like I need to finish that. Because that's how it was, I think it's important to understand that's how it was. That doesn't necessarily mean that's always how it will be. Our choices do matter.
Okay. Last question. Then we'll end this episode. So what does this group mean to you? The Bronx Over-Thinkers Society, or what the other acronym? Let's just put it that way. What does it mean to you? Because for me, it's about friendship. It's about kindling and keeping this. The spirit of thinking, of critical thinking. It's a combination of that. It's sort of like metaphoric in that the friendship is what I want to maintain, but it's also I have a similar relationship with philosophy and thinking about thinking. You know, it's something that I want to maintain, and it's sort of like it's almost sort of like a friend that you want to. Continue to hang around, like the ghost of for me it's the ghost of Descartes. Descartes sort of follows me around, and he's speaking in French, and that's okay because I'm francophone, so I can speak some of that. And so he talks about you don't need to do experiments, it's fine, just come up with an idea. And then I'm like, well, you should really do the experiment. Yeah, and so one thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we can get together at least like once a year, and we've been talking about doing like a Bronx Over-Thinkers Society annual, awesome, other things that begin with A activity, and so we'll probably plan that soon, but we don't have to do that on the podcast. So what does it mean to you?
Well, strangely enough, what it means to me is kind of like reintroducing the type of thinking that essentially was the informal kind of like environment of what became the academia. There was a time in Greek history where men, mainly men, really had the opportunity to gather together, and their thoughts were curbed amongst each other, delegated, related, and there was a sense of dialogue where people could say what they meant, and they had to be accountable for what they were relating. We live in a time where even if this video gets posted, we are kept from saying exactly what we want to say or relate simply because it doesn't fit some consensus of what should be said or what shouldn't be related. For me, I know every time that camera's on, I will be curbed by someone. But it doesn't mean that informally I can't talk to my friends here and relate how I really feel without having to be curbed or censored. So it gives me the opportunity, like a football team, like a baseball team. We play the game. We play the game the way it's supposed to be played. But that doesn't mean you're gonna see or hear what we say in the locker room, or what we're gonna say in the bar, or what we're gonna say when we're just hanging individually or in pairs. So yes, we can play the game, but there's a game that the philosophers used to play that even today in our colleges we're not able to do, and that is to have a dialogue that is based on reason, maybe overthinking, and getting to points that maybe are hurting people's feelings, but it's still there to be shared, respected, and taken account. That means based on facts, not on feelings. So it gives, for me, this overthinking is the chance to be clear of what we can't say.
Okay, all right. It bounces to me. Familia y cariño. Those are two things it means to me, and that's really sweet. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. And I do think that while I being anti-sexist is very important to me, and I wouldn't say that the Bronx Over-Thinkers Society. I think we have open membership, right? Well, we'll have to overthink that carefully. Okay. Anyhow, but
don't overthink it.
I think I'm certainly not limiting membership by gender or culture, but what you happen to have convened, Professor Noguera, Jim Nog, is for dudes who que llevan parte de América Latina in su corazones, right? Gente Latina with a connection to Latin America, but all the ways that we're being, or not all of them, but a lot of the ways that we're being, just our discourse, this hat, your hat, definitely. The clothes we're wearing, a lot of and especially the thoughtfulness, and the sensitivity that we're bringing. I would point out that these are, just by being this, we are living a richer, more diverse range of Latino masculinities than you see in media, in English or in Spanish, and it's certainly in my specific high school. There was this dude who I would just try to say two words to in Spanish in the morning, and his response came to be, morning after morning in homeroom, "Shut the F up. You ain't Puerto Rican." In English, right? But what he was performing was this very narrow image of a certain machista masculinity, a certain machista machismo, that actually had nothing to do with culture. He wasn't speaking Spanish. He wasn't connected to, his masculinity, his version of Latino masculinity wouldn't allow him to participate in the Latin dance group that some of the, young women in my high school invited us both to, and I participated in, and he didn't, But I think that urban, tough tipo, tigre, can be suffocating for lots of humans who are males, who identify as men. So, hermanos, I appreciate us. I appreciate for me, actualizing this notion that I was raised with, that their gender diversity is real, and we have this We have certain traditions in Espanol and in Latin America for thinking about gender diversity. So we don't have to wipe that all out. If there can be a machismo that is liberating, that is flexible, that is kind, and I feel like we're kind of living that.
Yeah, a redefinition of the Latino male. Yeah, I'm for that. Yeah.
I hope to continue having a conversations about issues that are philosophical but practical, and because as we are living this life, people are either in one of those two groups for whatever reason, and we are, because of technology and because of personal choices to isolate themselves, people are not connecting each other through meaningful conversations, and having like just these moments and talking and listening to your ideas is all. My hope is that it's going to help me open my mind and understand other things from other perspectives, and help people. Like after I finish here, I would like to be able to talk to someone on the street, and then or talk to someone in my family, and enlighten, if this we might say that, or just share some of the ideas that we have discussed here. But also go into practical matters. Hopefully in the future, we could do something more with more impact, something beyond the words, and more like an action or some sort of activity program. I don't know, doing something for the Bronx.
Think about that.
And not overthink about it. Right?
Okay.
I'll think about it.
Maybe we should think about it much more.
Next time on the Jim Nog Pod, Seco 1844 and Czar of the Moon return. I was thinking we talk a little bit MMA, since I know Czar of the Moon is a fan, and I was introduced to MMA a long time ago by friends of mine. So if you're a fan too, you might enjoy that show. Music for Jim Nog Pod by Marcos de la Guagua. marcosdelaguagua.com. Guagua is spelled Guagua. Art by Seco1844. At Seco1844 on Instagram. Seco is SEKO. My website, which contains news, bios, social media links, contact info, a bibliography, a blog, a podcast page, and press page, is jamesnoguera.com. Noguera is Noguera. Please show your support by subscribing and interacting with the pod. You can donate on patreon.com/jimnog. And thank you for your interest.